Journey with me through the emotional experience of love, devotion, and ultimate heartbreak in raising my son with significant disabilities. This is a collection of memoirs that capture a life well lived. I hope it inspires, I hope it teaches, and I hope it entertains. Thank you for joining me. Okay, I'm back with another segment. Thanks for seeing my videos again. We're now in June of 2021. I wanted to talk about a really important topic of epilepsy. I've come through this far right up to the point of daycare for Danny. And I've touched a little bit on the fact that he had seizures and epilepsy, but I think that it really deserves its own video. So Danny was literally born seizuring. He was born tremoring. He was born jittery. He was born basically with epilepsy. He also did some abnormal movements of his limbs shortly thereafter birth. In his incubator, he would rub his little heels together in a cyclical rhythmic fashion, indicative also at the time of the brain damage that he had received. And so it began certainly EEGs and different tests. He had some video that they did to show his infantile spasms were his beginning seizures. And I think basically throughout his life, he had some form of seizures to a greater or lesser extent. In the early days were the absolute worst in terms of the amount and the type and how it affected his life. He would often lose the full consciousness during his seizures. He would often yell out. He would certainly shake, often look off to the side, very forcefully. If he was playing with something or focused on something, he would immediately lose that focus and ability to continue throughout the seizure. And so after multiple medications, none of them worked. Sometimes really serious medications that had some awful side effects. I remember in one case, one of the side effects, he was on lamotrigine, and the side effect for him, although it wasn't listed as a typical side effect, he had terrible sweats. He would just profusely perspire and be sweaty from lamotrigine, and it did stop when he came off that medication. So there was a point when we introduced the concept and the suggestion of the ketogenic diet. This was in the very, very early days. It was one particular neurologist, and at the time he didn't think that it would be a good fit for Danny, and so we continued with seizures, with epilepsy for a couple of years. At about 3, by this time we had moved on to a different neurologist. He was still having uncontrolled epilepsy. We suggested again the ketogenic diet, and I think at this point the neurologist thought there was really nothing to lose. At the point when we started the ketogenic diet, Danny was having upwards of 250 seizures a day. Some were very obvious, others were not so obvious. He had a number, pretty well all of the different types of epilepsy and seizures at some point. So So we gave it a try. We tried the epilepsy diet. It involved an admission to the hospital. It involved a 2 to 3 day fast, whereby some of his more critical epilepsy medications were discontinued. The example I can think of right off the top of my head is valproic acid. That was stopped the same eve of the beginning of the fast. And so he did fast, so nothing except a little bit of water for 3 days. Did make me nervous. I did feel for him. However, we had restarted the diet over time, and each time I can assure you that by the end of 24 hours, sugar was depleted from the body, and that's the point of the fast. In order to get the diet jump started, you want the body to be depleted and have zero. And so after 24 hours, he didn't have any more sugar, and we could begin the diet. And so it starts at a higher ratio between carbohydrate and protein fat mixed, and it goes down in ratio. And so basically we weigh every bit of food or substance that goes into his body. He had Ross carbohydrate free tube feeding formula that was the base for his, and then we would add prune nectar, and again it would be weighed on a scale, and then we would add canola oil for the fat. And so this would be blended together. I believe you had a little bit of salt, a little bit of multivitamin, and then this would be tube fed all of his meals. And I have to say that by the end of the first full week, he was essentially medication and seizure free for the first time in his life. So the way the diet works is that you essentially trick the body into feeling like it's in a perpetual or continual state of fasting. And so the body begins to burn fat and some protein for fuel instead of sugar. And when the body does that, it produces what we call ketones. And some of those ketones form an ash-like substance in the brain, and it falls and settles on the brain, and that's what's believed to calm down the firing and the epilepsy. And these ketones are measured in the urine, and so several times a day we would measure his urine for ketones, and we wanted to see optimum highest level of ketones possible. Most people hear about ketones for people with diabetes, and the result in the body is somewhat similar, although with people with diabetes, it's not measured and calculated when the ketones are produced by the body, and so it becomes dangerous for people with diabetes. However, with this diet, because everything is so very specifically and carefully calculated, and then measured with the ketone sticks, we also had a glucometer, so we would measure sugar and make sure that continued to stay on the low side. The body compensates, of course, and does put some sugar out, which we need for the brain. So it's not as though you have none in your body, but it's enough to sustain. And so Danny essentially remained medication free for all of his life. He did continue to have periods of time in his life where he would have increase in seizure activity. Certainly times like puberty brought it out, times of great growth spurts, any type of physical stress on his body. Traveling, anytime that he traveled, we would see an increase in seizure activity, but it was certainly maintained to a level that was manageable. And I'd love to have more discussions about it. Thanks.